The Valthani were a peaceful people. They had soft, pale skin that glowed with gentle blue and green light when they felt strong emotions. Their bodies were thin and tall, built for a world with weak gravity and calm weather. They had large, dark eyes that could see in very low light, and their fingers were long and delicate, perfect for creating beautiful art and music. For 3,000 years, the Valthani had built a great civilization. They lived on 12 different worlds spread across the stars. They made beautiful paintings, wrote poetry, and traded rare goods with other species. They had never needed weapons because they had never had enemies. Their ships were elegant and graceful, designed to look beautiful as they moved through space. War was something they only read about in old history, books from other civilizations. The Valthani believed that all intelligent species would eventually choose peace over violence. They believed that talking and trading were always better than fighting. This belief had worked well for them for thousands of years. Then the Krath Dominion came. The Krath were everything the Valthani were not. They were massive creatures, standing 3 meters tall, with thick armored plates covering their bodies. Their homeworld was a harsh place of volcanic mountains and poisonous seas. They had evolved as hunters, as killers, and they had carried that nature with them into space. The Krath did not trade. They did not negotiate. They simply took what they wanted. When Krath ships first appeared in Valthani space, the High Council sent diplomats to greet them. The diplomats never returned. Their ship was found drifting in space, torn apart from the inside. The message was clear. The invasion began 3 days later. Valthani defense ships tried to protect their worlds, but it was hopeless. Their weapons were designed for ceremony, not combat. Their shields could stop small meteors, not heavy plasma fire. One by one, their ships were destroyed. One by one, their worlds fell. The Krath did not just conquer. They enjoyed causing fear and pain. They burned cities that had stood for 1,000 years. They destroyed libraries full of ancient knowledge. They took Valthani prisoners and made them work in terrible conditions. Those who could not work were killed. Within 6 months, 8 of the 12 Valthani worlds had fallen. Billions of Valthani were dead or enslaved. The remaining 4 worlds were crowded with refugees, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Krath came for them too. High Counselor Manethra stood in the emergency chamber on Veltha Prime, their homeworld. Round her, the other council members argued and cried. Some wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. Others wanted to fight to the last Valthani, even though they knew they would lose. A few suggested running, abandoning their worlds forever and trying to hide in the vast darkness between galaxies. Manethra listened to all of them. But her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the humans. Every species in the Galactic Accord knew about the humans. They had joined the community of spacefaring civilizations only 40 years ago. But in that short time, they had become famous. Not for their art or their science or their philosophy. The humans were famous because they were terrifying. Earth, the human homeworld, was a nightmare. Its gravity was crushing, strong enough to break bones of most other species. Its atmosphere was thick with oxygen, a gas that was poisonous or corrosive to many forms of life. The planet had extreme temperatures, violent storms, massive predators, and diseases that could kill in hours. The humans called it home. The humans themselves were just as frightening. They could survive wounds that would kill any other species. They could go days without sleep and still function. They could eat almost anything, including plants and animals that produced toxins. Their bodies healed with amazing speed. They felt pain, but they could ignore it through pure will. Most disturbing of all was their history. The humans had spent most of their existence fighting and killing each other. They had developed countless ways to cause death, from simple sharp rocks to weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had only stopped their constant wars when they finally reached the stars and found other intelligent life. The Galactic Accord had welcomed the humans carefully. They were allowed to trade and travel, but they were not trusted with important roles. The other species feared what might happen if humans were given power. They were seen as useful but dangerous, like a tool that might cut the hand that held it. Manethra had met humans before. She had found them strange and unsettling. They smiled, showing their teeth, which among most species was a threat display. They touched each other constantly, even strangers. They laughed at pain and made jokes about death. But she had also noticed something else. When a human gave their word, they kept it. When a human called someone a friend, they meant it. She made her decision. That night, without telling the full council, Minethra sent a message directly to Earth. It was not a formal diplomatic request. It was not sent through the Galactic Accord's proper channels. It was simply a desperate cry for help from one species to another. The message said, "We are the Velthani Collective. We are being destroyed by the Krath Dominion. Our people are dying. Our worlds are burning. The Galactic Accord will not help us. We have nowhere else to turn. We know what you are. We know your history. We know why other species fear you. We are asking anyway. Please help us." She sent the message and waited. She did not know if the humans would respond. She did not know if they would care about the fate of strange aliens they had barely met. She did not know what price they might demand for their help. All she knew was that without help, her people would be gone within a year. The Krath would take everything they had built, everything they had dreamed, everything they had loved, and they would destroy it all. On the other side of the galaxy, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, a communications officer noticed an unusual signal. It was not coming through normal channels. It was a direct transmission aimed specifically at Earth. The officer read the message once. Then she read it again, and she picked up her communicator and called her commanding officer. The message reached Admiral Yuki Tanaka's desk 3 hours later. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had served in the Terran Navy for 35 years. She had seen many things in her career, but she had never seen anything like this. A species she barely knew was asking humanity for help. Not the Galactic Accord, not any of the powerful civilizations that had looked down on humans since first contact. Just Earth. Just humans. She read the message a third time, then she reached for her communicator and began making calls. By morning, she had assembled the most important military leaders on Earth. The humans were going to war. Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat at the head of a long table in the deepest level of the United Terran Naval Command building. Around her sat 12 of the most powerful military leaders on Earth: generals, admirals, intelligence directors, and strategic planners. The room was silent as they finished reading the Velthani transmission. General Marcus Webb was the first to speak. He was a large man with a scarred face and hands that had seen decades of combat. "This is not our fight," he said. "The Velthani are not our allies. We have no treaty with them. We have no obligation to help. The Galactic Accord will condemn us if we get involved," added Director Chen, head of intelligence. "They have made it very clear that humans are not welcome in military matters. They think we are too violent, too unpredictable." Tanaka listened to their objections. She had expected them. Everything they said was true. Helping the Velthani would be risky. It would anger the Accord. It would cost lives and resources. There was no logical reason to do it. "I understand the risks," she said quietly, "but I want each of you to think about something. 40 years ago, we reached the stars. We thought we would find friends. Instead, we found species who looked at us like we were dangerous animals. They smile at us, they trade with us, but they keep us at a distance. They are afraid of what we are." She stood and walked to a large window that showed the night sky above. Stars glittered in the darkness, each one possibly home to civilizations that feared humanity. "The Velthani know what we are," she continued. "They know our history. They know how many wars we have fought, how many of our own kind we have killed. They know everything the galaxy whispers about humans. They still asked us for help, not because they think we are safe, because they are desperate, and they believe that whatever we are, we might be willing to help them." She turned back to face the table. "I think we should prove them right." The debate lasted for more hours. In the end, the vote was 9-3 in favor of intervention. So the 3 who voted against still agreed to support the mission. That was how humans worked. They argued. They disagreed, but when a decision was made, they stood together. Over the next 6 weeks, the first expeditionary fleet was assembled. 47 warships, from small, fast frigates to heavy battle cruisers. 20,000 sailors, soldiers, and support personnel. The largest military force humanity had ever sent beyond their own solar system. The ships were not beautiful like Velthani vessels. They were built for function, not form. Heavy armor plating covered every surface. Weapons bristled from every angle. The hulls were scarred and patched from years of service. They looked like what they were: machines designed for violence. The crews came from every nation on Earth, young men and women who had grown up on a planet that tried to kill them every day. They had survived earthquakes, hurricanes, diseases, and predators. They had trained in conditions that would break other species. They were strong and tough and stubborn, and they did not know how to give up. Private First Class James Okonkwo was 22 years old. He had grown up in Lagos, Nigeria, in a neighborhood where you learned to fight before you learned to read. He had joined the military at 18, looking for purpose and direction. Now he was loading his gear onto the transport ship that would carry his Marine unit to war. His squad leader, Sergeant Rosa Dominguez, walked past checking equipment. She was from Mexico City, a veteran of 3 combat deployments, and she had a reputation for keeping her people alive. "You ready for this, Okonkwo?" she asked. He shrugged. "Ready as anyone, I guess. Never fought aliens before. They die the same as anything else," she said. "Put enough holes in them, and they stop moving. Just remember your training and watch your squad mates. We take care of each other out there." On the flagship TSS Indomitable, Admiral Tanaka was reviewing intelligence reports on the Krath. What she read was troubling. The Krath were bigger and stronger than humans. Their armor plating could stop most small arms fire. Their ships were powerful and numerous. They had been conquering other species for centuries, but she also noticed weaknesses. The Krath fought as individuals, not as coordinated units. They relied on their physical superiority and expected enemies to break and run. They had never faced an enemy that could match their brutality and endurance. The night before the fleet departed, Tanaka addressed all 47 ships through a video link. She stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking into the camera that would broadcast her face to 20,000 people. "In a few hours we will leave Earth," she said. "We will travel across the galaxy to fight for people we have never met, against an enemy we do not know. Some of you are wondering why. Some of you are afraid. That is okay. I am afraid too." She paused, letting her words settle. "The galaxy thinks they know what humans are. They think we are violent. They think we are dangerous. They are right. We are all of those things. But we are something else too. We are the species that runs toward danger instead of away. We are the species that helps strangers even when it costs us. We are the species that fights for those who cannot fight for themselves." Her voice grew stronger. "The Velthani asked for help. They asked us because no one else would come. They are dying out there, and they put their faith in humanity. I say we show them that their faith was not misplaced. I say we show the whole galaxy what humans do when the innocent are in danger." Across the fleet, men and women listened to her words. Some were scared. Some were excited. All of them felt something stir inside them, something ancient and powerful. The feeling that they were part of something bigger than themselves. "We are going to war," Tanaka finished. "Some of us will not come back. But those who survive will be able to say they answered when someone called for help. They will be able to say they were there when humanity showed the galaxy who we really are." The fleet departed 3 hours later. 47 ships carrying 20,000 humans into the unknown. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another dot of light in the endless dark in front of them. Across the vast emptiness of space, the Velthani were waiting, hoping, praying that the stories about humans were true. They were about to find out. The human fleet emerged from faster than light, travel in the Keth-4 system, one of the last Velthani border worlds still under attack. What they found was worse than anything the intelligence reports had prepared them for. 3 massive Krath dreadnoughts hung in orbit above the planet. Each one was the size of a small city, covered in weapons and armor. Below them, the planet's surface was burning. Columns of smoke rose from what had once been beautiful Velthani cities. Explosions flashed across the landscape as the Krath continued their bombardment. Scattered across the space between the fleet and the planet were dozens of small ships, Velthani civilian vessels, packed with refugees trying to escape. The Kraths were ignoring them for now. But everyone knew that would not last. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Tanaka studied the tactical display. The odds were not good. 3 Krath dreadnoughts against 47 human ships. The dreadnoughts were bigger, better armed, and better protected. By any logical calculation, humans should retreat and wait for reinforcements. Tanaka had never been very good at logical calculations. "Open a channel to the Krath ships," she ordered. All frequencies. Her communications officer hesitated for just a moment, then obeyed. A green light indicated the channel was open. "Krath Dominion vessels," Tanaka said, her voice calm and cold. "You have 60 seconds to cease fire and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." On the lead Krath dreadnought, Commander Grax heard the transmission and felt something he had not felt in many years. Confusion. His sensors showed the human fleet clearly. 47 small ships against his 3 dreadnoughts. It was laughable. The humans should be running away or begging for mercy. Instead, they were giving him an ultimatum. Grax was a veteran of dozens of conquests. He had crushed species that were bigger than his own. He had destroyed civilizations that were older than his own. He knew exactly how this battle would end. He opened a return channel. "Human commander," he said, his voice a deep growl. "I have heard stories about your species. They say you are strong. They say you are stubborn. Let us see if the stories are true." He ended the transmission and gave the order to attack. What happened next would be studied and debated for centuries. The Krath. Ships opened fire with everything they had: plasma beams, missile swarms, kinetic projectiles, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The weapons screamed across space toward the human fleet. The human ships did not try to dodge. They could not have dodged even if they wanted to. Instead, they did something no other species in the galaxy would have done. They flew straight into the fire. Human warships were not designed like other vessels. They were built by people who had grown up in heavy gravity, who expected their world to try to kill them. The hulls were thick and dense. The armor was layered and redundant. Systems were built with multiple backups. They were ugly and heavy and slow compared to the elegant ships of other species. They were also incredibly hard to kill. Krath weapons that would have torn through. Valthani ships barely scratched the human hulls. Missiles that should have caused devastating damage were absorbed by layered armor. The human ships took hit after hit. They kept coming. Then they started firing back. Human weapons were different from what the Krath had faced before. They were not elegant or precise. They were brutal and overwhelming. Railguns that fired metal projectiles at incredible speeds. Torpedo salvos that split into dozens of independent warheads. Point defense systems that filled space with a wall of destruction. The lead Krath. Dreadnought shuddered as the first human railgun rounds punched through its armor. Grax stared at his damage reports in disbelief. How was this possible? The human ships were supposed to be primitive. Their technology was supposed to be inferior. The battle turned into chaos. Human frigates darted between the larger ships, firing and retreating. Human cruisers formed battle lines and poured concentrated fire into the dreadnoughts. The Krath tried to respond, but their tactics were designed for enemies who would break and run. The humans did not break. The humans did not run. On the Indomitable, Admiral Tanaka watched the battle unfold. Her ship had taken heavy damage. Fires burned on 3 decks. 47 crew members were dead, with many more wounded. But the ship was still fighting. "Launch the boarding parties," she ordered. This was the part of the battle no one had expected. While the ships exchanged fire, human marine transports raced toward the lead dreadnought. They were small and fast, designed to slip through gaps in enemy defenses. Several were destroyed by Krath point defense guns. But enough got through. Private First Class James Okonkwo felt the transport slam into the side of the Krath dreadnought. The cutting beam on the front of the transport burned through the hull. And then they were inside. He had trained for this moment. He had practiced boarding actions in simulators and mock-ups, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. The Krath ship was hot and humid, filled with strange smells and sounds. Warning lights flashed. Alarms screamed. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, 3-meter-tall armored aliens were waiting to kill him. "Move," Sergeant Dominguez shouted. "Contact front." The first Krath warrior came around a corner, and Okonkwo saw just how big they really were. The creature towered over him, covered in natural armor plates. Carrying a weapon that looked like it could cut a car in half, Okonkwo did not hesitate. He aimed at the gaps between the armor plates and fired. The Krath stumbled, then charged forward. Okonkwo kept firing. The rest of his squad joined in. The Krath fell 3 meters from where they stood. "Keep moving," Dominguez ordered. "We have a ship to take." The battle inside the dreadnought was brutal and bloody. The Kraths were bigger and stronger, but the humans were faster and fought as teams. They covered each other, communicated constantly, and never gave up ground once they had taken it. Commander Grax received reports of human soldiers throughout his ship. They were in the engineering section. They were in the weapons control center. They were everywhere, and nothing seemed to stop them. His warriors killed humans, and more humans took their place. His warriors wounded humans, and the humans kept fighting anyway. For the first time in his long career, Grax felt fear. For hours after the battle began, it was over. 2 Krath dreadnoughts were destroyed. The third Grax's flagship was captured by human marines. The commander himself was found dead on his bridge. Having taken his own life rather than face capture, the human fleet had lost 2 frigates and 847 personnel. Many more ships were damaged, some severely, but they had one below them. The Velthani refugees stopped fleeing and turned their ships around. They had watched the entire battle. They had seen the humans take hits that should have destroyed them. They had seen human soldiers board an enemy ship and fight room by room. They had seen exactly what the Deathworlders could do. Some of them cried. Some of them prayed. All of them felt something they had not felt in months. Hope news of the Battle of Kethfor spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species in the Galactic Accord heard the story. 47 human ships had faced 3 Krath dreadnoughts and won. Human soldiers had boarded an enemy vessel and captured it through close combat. The Deathworlders had shown exactly why other species feared them. The Galactic Accord responded with anger. They issued formal condemnation of humanity's actions. They accused Earth of violating treaties, ignoring protocols, and engaging in unauthorized military operations. They demanded that the human fleet withdraw immediately. The Krath Dominion responded with rage. The Supreme Warlord himself broadcast a declaration of total war against Earth. He promised to destroy every human colony, every human ship, every human being in the galaxy. He assembled a fleet of over 200 warships and personally led them toward Velthani. Space? Admiral Tanaka ignored both. Responses. Reinforcements arrived from Earth. Volunteers. Flooded recruiting stations across the planet. Within 2 months, the human fleet had grown from 47 ships to 120. Medical ships, supply vessels, and troop transports followed. Humanity was not just fighting a battle anymore. They were fighting a war. The liberation campaign began with the Outer Velthani worlds. The humans developed tactics specifically designed to counter Krath's strengths. They used their ship's heavy armor to absorb damage while closing to close range where their weapons were most effective. They deployed Marines to capture or disable enemy vessels, rather than simply destroying them. They learned to exploit the Krath's individual fighting style by using coordinated team tactics. Private. First Class James Okonkwo, now promoted to Corporal after Kethfor, fought in the liberation of 3 more worlds. Each battle was brutal. Each victory came with a cost. He watched friends die. He killed enemies who had done nothing to him personally. He learned what war really meant. On the planet Velsecundus, his squad was assigned to clear a labor camp where the Krath held thousands of Velthani prisoners. The camp was surrounded by walls and guard towers. Inside, the conditions were terrible. The Velthani were starving, sick, and broken. Okonkwo's squad fought through the front gate in a night assault. The Krath guards were tough, but the humans had surprise and determination on their side. By dawn, the camp was secured. Okonkwo would never forget what he saw when they opened the prison buildings. Hundreds of Velthani, their soft glowing skin dimmed almost to nothing, staring at the human soldiers with huge dark eyes. They were too weak to stand, too afraid to speak. A young Velthani, barely more than a child, crawled toward Okonkwo. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much suffering. She reached out and touched his armored hand. "Are you real?" she asked in broken common language. "Are you really here?" Okonkwo knelt down beside her. He removed his helmet so she could see his face. "We're real," he said. "We're here. You're safe now." The Velthani child began to cry. So did Okonkwo, though he would never admit it later. The most difficult battle came at Veltha Prime, the Velthani homeworld. The Supreme Warlord himself led the defense with over 100 ships. He had fortified the system with weapons platforms, minefields, and ground forces. He was determined to crush the humans here, and then their interference forever. The battle lasted 19 days. Human ships fought without rest. Crews worked in shifts, grabbing sleep when they could. Damage control teams patched holes in holes while the ships were still under fire. Engineers performed miracles with limited supplies and broken equipment. On the ground, human marines held a defensive line around the Velthani capital city. The Krath threw wave after wave of warriors at them. The humans dug in and refused to move. Corporal Okonkwo spent 12 days in a trench outside the city. His squad held a critical position on the defensive line. Krath attacks came every few hours. Between attacks, he ate cold rations, slept in his armor, and wrote messages to his family that he was not sure would ever be delivered. Sergeant Dominguez was killed on day 8. Taking a plasma bolt meant for one of her squad members. Okonkwo took command of what was left of the squad. 7 soldiers out of an original 12, they held the line anyway. The Krath could not understand what they were facing. They had conquered dozens of species. Every one of them had eventually broken and surrendered. The humans would not break. Injured humans kept fighting. Exhausted humans refused to retreat. Surrounded humans fought to the last soldier. On day 15, Krath desertions began. Warriors who had never known fear started to question their commanders. The Supreme Warlord executed dozens of deserters, but it only made things worse. His army was losing its will to fight against an enemy that seemed immune to fear and pain. On day 19, human reinforcements finally broke through the Krath blockade. Fresh ships and troops poured into the system. The Supreme Warlord, seeing his fleet crumbling around him, ordered a general retreat, but it was too late for retreat. Human ships pursued the Krath fleet across 3 star systems. They gave no rest, no pause, no mercy. By the end, the Krath Dominion had lost 60% of their entire military. The Supreme Warlord himself died when his flagship was destroyed trying to escape. The war was over. On the surface of Veltha Prime, Velthani emerged from shelters they had hidden in for months. They walked through streets that were cratered by weapons fire, past buildings that were burned and broken. But they were free. High Counselor Manithra found Corporal Okonkwo sitting alone on a pile of rubble. He was still wearing his battered armor. His eyes had the empty look of someone who had seen too much death. She sat down beside him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "Thank you," she finally said. "I know those words are not enough, but thank you." Okonkwo looked at her. He thought about Sergeant Dominguez. He thought about all the others who had not survived. He thought about the Velthani child in the labor camp. "We just did what was right," he said quietly. "That's all." Beneath her skin glowed with soft blue light. Among her people, it meant deep respect. "That is exactly why we asked you for help," she said. "Because we believed you would do what was right." Okonkwo did not know what to say to that. So he said nothing. He just sat there with the alien leader, watching the sun rise over a world that was free because humans had answered a call for help. The Treaty of Veltha Prime was signed 6 weeks after the last battle ended. Representatives from Earth, the Velthani Collective, and what remained of the Krath Dominion gathered on the steps of the Grand Archive. the oldest and most sacred building on the Velthani homeworld. The Krath had planned to destroy this building. Instead, they were signing their surrender in front of it. The terms were harsh but fair. The Krath would release all conquered territories. They would pay reparations to rebuild what they had destroyed. They would reduce their military to a defensive force only. They would recognize human authority to enforce peace in the region for the next 50 years. The Krath representative signed the treaty with shaking hands. His species had never lost a war before. They had never been forced to accept terms from anyone. The experience had broken something inside them. They would spend generations trying to understand what had happened and how they had been defeated by a species. They dismissed as primitive, the Galactic Accord was furious about everything. They had not been consulted about the treaty. They had not been invited to the negotiations. Humanity had acted alone, fought alone, and now was claiming authority over an entire region of space. Formal protests were filed. Diplomatic notes were sent. Threats of sanctions and isolation were made. But behind the official anger, something else was happening. Something the Accord had not expected. Other species were watching. Small civilizations. Weak civilizations. Species who had lived in fear of their stronger neighbors for generations. They had seen what happened to the Velthani. They had seen the Krath come with their massive ships and brutal warriors. And they had seen humans, the strange Deathworlders from the Poison Planet, fly across the galaxy to help. The humans had not asked for payment. They had not demanded territory or resources. They had simply answered a call for help, bled for strangers, and left. Messages began arriving at Earth from across the galaxy. Careful, nervous messages from species who had never dared to contact humans before. They asked questions. They expressed admiration. Some of them, quietly and secretly, asked if humans might be willing to help them too. If the time ever came, Ambassador Selvith had been chosen to speak at the treaty ceremony. She was the diplomat who had first sent the desperate transmission to Earth. She had watched her people die and her world burn. She had taken the greatest risk of her life by reaching out to the Deathworlders. Now she stood at a podium, looking out at a crowd that included humans, Velthani, representatives from the Accord, and journalists from 100 different worlds. Her soft skin glowed with colors that shifted as she spoke, showing emotions that humans could not fully understand but could somehow feel. Before this war, she began. My people thought we understood the galaxy. We believed that violence was a primitive thing, something that civilized species had left behind. We believed that reason and trade and diplomacy could solve any problem. We were wrong. She paused, looking at the human delegation. Admiral Tanaka sat in the front row wearing her dress uniform. Her face was calm, but her eyes showed the weight of everything she had been through. The Krath taught us that some problems cannot be solved with words. Some enemies do not want peace. Some dangers can only be stopped with force. This was a hard lesson for my people. Many of us did not survive to learn it. Her glow shifted to deeper colors. Sadness, gratitude, hope. But the humans taught us something else. They taught us that strength does not have to mean cruelty. They taught us that warriors can also be protectors. They taught us that the same fire that burns can also give warmth. She turned to face Admiral Tanaka directly. We called your kind Deathworlders. We were right. You come from a world of death. You understand death in ways my people never will. But when death came for us, you stood in its path. You did not ask what you would gain. You did not calculate whether we were worth saving. You simply came. Tanaka stood and walked to the podium. The two of them faced each other, human and Velthani, so different in every physical way, but connected by something deeper. We did what any decent people would do, Tanaka said simply. Someone asked for help. We helped. Selvet's glow brightened. That is exactly the point, Admiral. In all my years of diplomacy, dealing with hundreds of species, I have never met another civilization that would say those words and mean them. You help because someone asked. That is not common in this galaxy. That is not normal. That is extraordinary. The crowd was silent. Journalists stopped recording. Even the Accord representatives seemed moved. Despite their official disapproval, Later that day, there was a smaller ceremony, a memorial for the humans who had died in the war. Over 3,000 names were read aloud, 3,000 men and women who had left their homes and families to fight for strangers. Corporal James Okonkwo stood in the crowd, wearing his dress uniform. He had been promoted twice during the war. He had been offered medals and honors. He had turned most of them down. The only thing he kept was a small crystal that the Velthani child from the labor camp had given him. She had found it in the ruins of her home and wanted him to have it. He thought about Sergeant Dominguez. He thought about all the others he had lost. He wondered if they would think it was worth it. He hoped they would. A Velthani approached him after the ceremony. It was High Counselor Manethra herself. She was old for her kind, but she moved with grace and dignity. "I want to show you something," she said. She led him to a wall near the Grand Archive. It was new, built from white stone that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Carved into the stone were thousands of names. Human names. "We are building a memorial," Manethra explained. "Every human who died fighting for us will have their name here. My people will remember them for as long as our civilization exists." Okonkwo stared at the wall. He found Dominguez's name near the top. He touched the carved letters with his fingers. "Why?" he asked. "Why does it matter so much to you?" Manethra stood beside him, her soft glow warming in the cool air. "Because for 3,000 years, my people believed we were alone in our values. We thought peace and kindness were weaknesses in a galaxy full of predators. Then you came. You showed us that strength and kindness can exist together. You showed us that we were not wrong to hope." She placed her long fingers on his shoulder. "You showed us that even Deathworlders can be heroes." Okonkwo did not know what to say. So he just stood there, looking at the names of his fallen friends carved in stone on an alien world under alien stars. They had come so far from home. They had given so much, but they had answered when someone called for help. That was what humans did. In the years that followed, everything changed. The Galactic Accord, slowly, reluctantly, began to accept humans in new roles. Other species sought alliances and friendships with Earth. The Deathworlders were no longer just feared. They were respected. And somewhere in the galaxy, whenever a small and helpless civilization faced a threat they could not survive alone, they knew there was someone they could call. The humans would come. They always did.